Hi guys, welcome back to Planet Moonshine, the channel where we use home distilling techniques in a professional microbrewery. This is the second part of my video on making baiju. In this video, we'll pick up where we left off, which was we'd just started our rice to ferment with our red yeast rice, and we'll be looking at its progress every couple of days as we give it a stir. And we'll be looking at the equipment I'm going to use to do the distillation and how that distillation runs itself. And then we'll be doing some baiju tasting. And between fermentation and distillation, we'll also taste the red rice wine and see how that comes out. So if that's got you interested, stick around. So it's feeling quite heavy. There is liquid underneath. But that cap is quite thick. But considering it only went on a couple of days ago and that it was pretty much solid rice, it's already liquefying to quite a large extent. So here we are, guys. This is day number 6. You can see bubbles around the edge of this cap, which is now quite a dark red colour. Wow. The cap itself, wow, it's so much softer. The liquid's quite close to the surface. And I'm just going to give this a good stir up. Okay, so this is day 12. Yeah, the cap's still quite thin. Just give it a stir. There's still some bubbling taking place, so we're still fermenting. This is day 18. The surface cap is now very, very thin. And I've just given it a stir. There were very, very few bubbles. I think we're coming to the end of fermentation. We'll check again in a couple of days and see how it's going. So this is day 20 and big changes. All of the cap floating on the surface has pretty much disappeared, and you can see bubbles rising to the surface constantly, only slowly, but they're coming. I think that means we're still fermenting, so we'll keep an eye on. Okay guys, so here we are. This is about 40 days of fermentation done. And as you can see, there's very little activity now. There's a few bubbles still rising, but very, very little. And I think I'm just going to call that done. Hi guys. Welcome back. So, seems like a long time since we made the first video, and 40 days have gone by, more or less, and yeah, I think we're ready to distill our red rice wine into baiju. So, a couple of things. So, I took a sample of the red rice wine and I put it on my refractometer, and my refractometer said it was about 22% alcohol by volume. So that sounded like a lot. So I took my alcohol hydrometer and stuck that in there, and that said 0%. Now, what is the actual ABV of this liquid? I have no idea. It tastes alcoholic, that's for sure, and we're just going to run it and see what happens. I don't think it's going to ferment out any further, so there's not much point in that. Somewhere around day 20, I did add another batch of yeast and another couple of tablespoons of yeast nutrient because I saw that fermentation had slowed right down. But I don't think that made any difference whatsoever. So I think it was just really just about there. Don't forget, this is what's called parallel fermentation. So on the one hand, you've got the red yeast rice converting starches into sugar. And as that process is taking place, you've then got the yeast converting that sugar into alcohol. So you have no starting gravity or ending gravity that make any sense because the conversion takes place during the process. And it stops when there's not really much sugar left, or starch left to convert into sugar, and then sugar left to convert into alcohol. So, like I said, I think we're about done, and we're going to move on. So the next thing I've got to do is start cleaning things. The 50 litre still hasn't been used in a little while. That's what we're going to use as the boiler for this. And so I've got to clean that out. And then we've got to have a little chat about heavenly pots. And I'll show you what I'm planning to do in lieu of having a real, genuine Chinese heavenly pot. All right, let's get into it. So a heavenly pot is basically a steamer that sits on top of the boiler, and on top of that sits a condenser. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this, which is my trusty old 25-gallon stainless steel fermenting conical fermenter, which just happens to be equipped with triclamp connections, 1.5-inch triclamps at the top and at the bottom. And there's also a port here, which I'm just going to seal that off with a cap. And what we're going to do is we're going to use this 2-inch to 1.5-inch adapter to attach on here, and we're going to mount this on the top. So I've never tried this before. I don't know if it's going to work, but we're going to give it a go. Okay, so after a fair amount of fiddling and a small amount of cursing, we have this in place. And if we look down inside, we can see that we have a hole that goes all the way through to the boiler underneath. So that's good. So my harebrained idea is starting to look a little bit more like a still. We've got our boiler, we've got our heavenly pot substitute here, we've got a U-tube coming across the top. This is a 2-inch triclamp fitting, so we should be able to just straight up connect the shotgun condenser to this, and we're good to go. So I'll come back to you when we're ready to fill the still. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start the flow, and then I'm going to stick a colander underneath to try to avoid sucking up all of the rice. I think that's about all I can sensibly siphon. So the rest of it, because I don't want to get too much rice in there, so the rest of it we're just going to have to do with a jug. Okay, so we're going now a jug at a time, or half a jug at a time. So we seem to have reached a point of diminishing returns in here. I'm not getting much more liquid in. So what I'm going to do now is just change my strategy a little bit. And in here is our colander turned upside down. And what we're going to do is we're just going to take the barrel and pour it in the muslin over the top of the colander will stop the lumps from going through, and hopefully the liquid will just drain in. Let's see how that works out. So what I'm going to do now is mix in some rice hulls. Let's just get these in there and get them mixed. So that's about half a kilo I've put in. And what it's doing is it's mixing with the mush, and it's going to provide spaces in between the levels of the mush to let all of the vapor through, so that we can have a nice, good flow of vapor through the rice hull mixture. Now, the rice hulls won't add any flavour of their own. After all, they're just the shells of rice grains. So all we're trying to do is just get this mixture to a drier consistency. As you can see, the liquid level now is really low, and hopefully the rest of that will just drain through. Okay, so here we are, all set up and looking like a still. Condenser's in place, water's connected and is flowing. Drain valve is closed, elements in. Let's just turn it on, full power, and we'll wait until we get drips. And while we do, we'll have a chat. All right, guys, so here we are. And this is a lovely glass of our red rice wine. So, what's it like? Well, it doesn't smell like rice, not at all. It's got a very fruity aroma, like if I had to go with anything, I'd say like peaches. Flavour-wise, it's great. I could drink that. I could drink that all day long. Alcohol? Yeah. There's plenty of alcohol in it. I couldn't tell you what strength it was. It feels about the same as drinking an average wine. It's a lot thinner than a wine. It's more, not as thick on your tongue, I guess. But it tastes great. Yeah, sort of peachy strawberry kind of flavour to it. Very nice indeed. We'll compare that to the distillate later on. So, we're just probably coming up to the boil. This is really hot. This tube, I can still put my hand on it, but it's getting hotter. And so pretty soon we'll start to have vapour travelling up into the heavenly pot. Okay guys, so we're approaching a sort of a moment of truth with this experiment. Yeah, for sure. That is really hot to the touch. This section is also hot to the touch, but don't forget, at about this kind of level, we've got a colander. And on the colander is some muslin, and then above that is all of our mush mixed with rice hulls. Now, it's just starting to warm up in the area above the colander. It's quite hot below it, because it's full of boiling steam. But because we're still boiling crazy down here, and this top section's only just starting to get warm now, the question is all this going to explode with pressure before we start getting steam released? That's the experiment. Let's see if it works. I think we're going to be okay because I can feel this getting hotter now, so that means steam is flowing. It's still cold over here, still cold on the tube. So let's see how it goes. Okay, well, there's liquid starting to gather inside the parrot. So let's just drop in the hydrometer and see what reading we're getting. Yeah, look, there we go, it's just starting to peak. Let's just see how this is doing. I think we can turn that probably down a little bit. Save a little bit of water. Yeah, that's cool. All right, so. Here we go. We've got our first drips. And according to this, they're coming off at, well, you know, about 78. So I'm going to leave this whole thing running on full power because that's the traditional way to do it. It'll smear all over the place and it'll be rough, but that's Baijiu. So we're going to see how it goes just like that. I'm going to collect about 100 mils of 4 shots, and then I'm going to start collecting in these smaller jars until I think we're truly into hearts. Then I'll collect in some larger jars and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so jar number 1 is about done. Yeah, it smells kind of headsy. Okay, so I've taken off a 3rd jar and now our ABV is sitting around 60, which is kind of a normal ABV for Baijiu collection. So I've switched to a larger jar. I figure we're into hearts now. Let's have a little sample and see what it's tasting like. Okay, so there's a mustiness and a riciness in the smell of this. I wouldn't call it tails. I certainly hope it's not. In the mouth, it's quite bright. It's not as hot as I thought it would be at the back of my throat, considering it's still 60% plus. You can taste the rice. You can definitely get a rice kind of aroma from it, but it's not overpowering. There's still a fruitiness. I wouldn't describe it as fruity as the rice wine, but it's quite pleasant. So we'll let that collect. Okay, so I'm pretty sure we're into tails now. I've stuck a big jar under, I'll just collect it and use it as feints. We're coming off the still now. Where are we? About 45, maybe 44 ABV. Over here, let's see what we've got. So we've got 500 mils that was very headsy. We've got 500 mils that was a little bit headsy. We've got 500 mils which was starting to get into hearts. We've got about 2 litres that was heartsy and just starting to smell a little bit of tails when I stopped it. Got about 1 litre and a bit in this jar, which is starting to turn tailsy, and the jar that's coming off now is very tailsy. So what I'm going to do is just going to cover these up with some tissue paper and come back tomorrow and see what we've got. Okay guys, so we're at the end of the run now. If I look at the hydrometer, I'd say we're about 30% ABV. What's coming off now is cloudy, tailsy, horrible. And normally I would just, well, that'll go for faints, but normally I would just switch off the still at this point, call it quits. But I've got to be a little bit more careful today, because if I do, what's going to happen is everything's going to cool, but normally the pressure would equalize from here inside of my still. But it can't today because there's a layer of stuff sat in here. So this part will equalize its pressure, but this part will suddenly have a very large negative pressure, and you could start having some problems because of that negative pressure. So what I've done is I've put my rubber gloves on, and with the still on and still running, I'm just going to loosen the inspection port, the fill port here. So we're just going to let that release pressure. Now we can turn the still off. And there we are. So now the pressure's equalized in the top section and the lower section. We're not going to have any implosions. Okay guys, so welcome back. It's the day after I distilled that Baijiu. These have been sat overnight with a bit of tissue on them just to breathe a little bit, and I thought I'd come back this morning and decide what's going into the blend and what's not. And I think the way I'm going to do that is just with taking a sample from each jar and proofing it down a little bit, because I think I am going to proof this down a little bit, and then giving it a try and seeing what we've got. Now, my notes from last night said this was headsy, although not overpoweringly so. If I take a sniff, I can still smell a hint of heads about that. That one, no heads, nurse. That one must be hearts. This one, that's hearts. And this one, yeah, that's tails. That's going nowhere but faints. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple of mils of each of these, and we'll see what we've got. So this is my automatic pipette, which I have to say I'm really loving because it's just so easy to use. This is just a bit of water, and I'm going to take about 4 mils of water, which should proof that down to, I don't know, about 38%, maybe 40. I'll get the proper ABVs when we do the blend. So on the nose, there's a dusty mustiness to it, like a kind of the smell you'd get if you opened a fresh bag of rice and just stuck your nose in and sniffed. It's that kind of ricey dustiness. It's the kind of smell which in the tails jar is horribly overpowering and mixed with wet dog. But there is a hint of that riciness here in the liquor. Okay. That's really good. So the flavors I'm getting are a sort of muted mix of the peach and strawberry, which was the rice wine. The rice wine had a kind of tartness to it and a sweetness to it at the same time, and a really enjoyable hit of that strawberry and peach flavour. No hint of riciness at all in the wine. And I really like the wine. I might make it again just to make the wine. But for the Baijiu, I'm really happy with that. I'm going to include the heads in the mix. Baiju is a headsy spirit, and the heads in that aren't overpowering. I discarded maybe 150 mils of 4 shots. And that doesn't taste bad. It's not clawing at my throat at all. So I think we're going to go with a blend of these 4. Blended Baijiu is sat at precisely 61% ABV, which is, you know, more or less in the range for a Baijiu that you'd buy commercially. So I'm just going to try a little bit completely straight. Yeah, so you've got a hint of that riciness on the nose. Yeah, and that fruitiness. Yeah, that fruitiness from the strawberry peach kind of aroma is right there. It's quite powerful. It is a lot warmer on the back of my throat, but then it's a 60% spirit. So, and it's nowhere near trying to kill me as much as some of the commercially bought examples that I've tried in the past. So, I'm really tempted not to proof this down at all, but I'm going to try and proof it down to 50, and we'll see what that tastes like, but I'm just going to do it on a small scale, and we'll try that. Okay guys, so it seems that at 61%, if I want to proof it down, I need to add just about 0.9 of a mil of water, so to 4. So I'll put 4 mils in here, and then we'll just wind this down. Twist the thing the right direction to 0.9 of a mil, of water. That's pleasant. Very easy drinking. Yeah, I quite like the way that's gone. Let's just compare it back to the neat. I think I prefer it at 61. All right, so that's going to be about it for this Baiju video. I think making the Baiju has been a great success. I'm very, very pleased with the end result. I've definitely made a Baiju which doesn't have that burnt rubber flavour, which many of the commercial examples do have. That's now quite a nice, bright, fresh, approachable spirit. You know you're drinking something strong, and that's Baiju. So I'm really happy. So if you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more about making spirits, then hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. You'll get notified when my next videos come out. So where does that leave us? It leaves us thinking about what's happening next. So if you've been following along, the previous video that I made was about making gin, and I've got lots of gin over here, and my plan is to infuse that gin with some nice fruit flavors, things like rhubarb and ginger, cucumber and mint, maybe blackberries. So when I gather together the necessary fresh fruits for that, I'll be doing a video on that. The other thing, just this morning I went to the animal feed suppliers locally because we've got a sheep at home. I know it's a bit crazy. So I went to get some sheep food, and I just happened to notice that he also sold what the Americans would call kibbled corn, which is basically maize that's been ground down into smaller pieces, which is pretty heavy duty milling is necessary to do that because maize is so damned hard. So I bought a 25 kilo bag of that for, I think it was 14 euros. So now I've got 25 kilos of corn. What on earth am I going to do with that? I think it's time to make bourbon. So like I said, you want to watch that? Subscribe, ring the bell. You'll get told when it's done. All right. Cheers, guys. Catch you on the next one.